segment here, we're going to talk about, we'll get into them right away. Canadian inflation. Oh my gosh, it's the talk of I'd like to say world, but this is talk of our Canadian government right now, and everyone's talking about the inflation that's happening. And then our second segment, we're going to actually talk about something that everyone's thinking about selling right now because it's been a crazy seller's market, and it's like we're on the top of the mountain right now. So is it time to sell? How many can you sell your investment properties to buy a new home? Because in some cases, some people have to because prices are so high and they need a home. And in order to afford it, maybe they have to sell more than one of their investment properties. So that's our second segment. So without further ado, this article I'm going to read from is Better Dwelling. I like Better Dwelling. There's a few, specific places I really like going for really good information because I know that they really look into their posts and stats and everything. So this one is headlined: Canadian inflation pressure is broadening across categories as it hits 3-decade high. So Canadian inflation, didn't hear your transitory call apparently. It's widening to other categories. So Statistics Canada data shows the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, soared in January. The annual growth rate reached 5.1% for the month, advancing from 4.8% a month before. Canada's inflation hasn't grown this fast since September of 1991, 3 decades ago. To make things worse, high inflation is being felt across categories, making it harder to slow down. Canadian inflation is spreading to more categories. A new BMO analysis. Can I talk?
I believe the word you're looking for is analytics.
You're closer than me. Looks at how wide the impact of inflation has become. Only a few weeks ago, people were under the impression inflation was temporary. Few believe that now. Not that you need another way to look at inflation, along with a host of measures used by the Bank of Canada, but here's one that highlights how widespread price pressures have become, wrote BMO senior economist Robert Kavkick. He looked at 18 categories of CPI and found most are much higher than target. Of the 18 major CPI categories, 83% saw annual inflation rates above the 2% mark in January. That's the highest share in 30 years, he says. Canada has seen 4 in 5 inflation components rise above target. For those unaware, the BOC annual growth target for CPI is only 2% and has been for some time. The goal is to keep it around that mark. But 4 in 5 CPI subcomponents are growing faster. It's also worth noting that almost 2/3 of categories are above the 3% mark he called out. So the 2% annual growth rate is already an issue in breach. Above 3%, the CPI component has breached the upper tolerance band. While the BOC is unlikely to mention it out loud, this has had the nervous above their call. All Canadian provinces have seen over 4% growth. I can go on and on about this, but just have a look, do some research yourself, and realize where we are at, and just prepare yourself. And as long as you prepare yourself for what you know is ahead of you, by the stats in front of you, you will be okay because you will be able to make wise decisions moving forward. So I suggest you do that and be prepared. So the BOC has vocally reinforced its belief that high prices are transitory. Governor Macklem even reiterated he sees supply chains being behind high prices. It's not a popular opinion these days. The U.S. Federal Reserve has openly said it's time to kill the use of the word transitory. Instead, they've begun referring to the recent surge as an inflation shock. Transitory inflation resolves on its own, but an inflationary shock requires policy changes. BMO also appears to be skeptical of the idea that inflation is transitory. All of this to say that inflation pressure is widespread across categories and regions, not driven by any particular special factor that will just go away. So that's what Kavkick ends his note by saying. So Just be prepared. And that is the end of our first segment.
Well, you don't have to look far to see inflation. You just have to go to the gas pump, and I'm sure glad I don't drive anything with a Hemi in it or anything.
You know what? I have about 10 kilometers left on my tank, and I'm almost refusing to fill it up.
Another reason you might want to break that motorbike out.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's some food for thought for sure. We'll take a quick break here. We'll come back with segment number 2. If people want more information, where can they go?
MicheleCummins.ca.
We're back with more right after this.